Beth, you please call the roll.
Mr. Bodie?
Here.
Mrs. Gephardt? Here. Mr. Gousset?
Here.
Mr. Truitt?
Here.
And Ms. Wassman?
Here, but you know what I'm going to do. I want to wish a very happy birthday to Mr. Culp, who is the second. I'm the sixth. I'll just pass right up. I'll get to you in a minute. Mr. Truitt is next week, and Ms. Collier has a very happy birthday today. So if you stay till the end, I've got nothing but cakes for those of us that still last. Just say, happy board birthday month for all of us. All right, I'm here. Happy birthday.
Thank you. All right, well, ask everybody please stand for the pledge. I think the flag over in the corner.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, we'll jump right in. It's a pleasure to see everybody here this evening. I know a lot of people here are here for recognition of academic achievement and outstanding contributions. So we put those at the front, and certainly you're welcome to stay for the whole board meeting, but don't feel like you have to, and most people don't. So, all right, Mr. Call, turn it over to you.
So I'd like to kick it off by asking Dr. Partlow to come up to the podium. We have a special recognition for Carla.
I'd like Carla Lane to please join me up here at the podium. Dear friend and colleague of 6 years, it's my privilege to speak to you about Carla today, and I know she has several family members here. We're thrilled they could come as well, but Carla was the first smile I saw when I came to Grandview as the coordinator of data for the district and student services. Her job was about as big as they come, but one thing that a lot of people don't know about Carla, in her close to 25 years, she's been a paraprofessional, she's been a building secretary in an elementary when it was Edison, she's been at Larson Middle School, she was high school secretary, she was given the job, district data and student services coordinator, because her job, she was so good, she just kept getting asked to do more and more and more things. And I think a lot of people don't know how much problem solving goes into that position. And when you think of all the changes in our district in the past 25 years, everything from changing from graded report cards to standards-based report cards to trimesters at the elementary, when everybody else was doing quarters, to hybrid and COVID. And I can remember having conversations with her when Credit Flux came out. You know, how do we put that data in the system? And our district's always been great at finding creative ways to meet students' needs. Carla was the magician that we went to figure out how do you accurately put that into student data. So she is our expert on Progress Book. She is an expert in student services. She has been my right arm when it comes to special ed. She checks every IEP, every ETR, every form that comes into our office to make sure that it's accurate, and goes back and responds to every one of those intervention specialists if there's something they miss. And she does it with kindness, and she does it with helpfulness. When we've hired new secretaries, she's gone to their buildings to help train them. She's invited them over to work with her. We've been pleased to see her working with Denise in the office next to mine, training the person who's trying to learn everything that Carla does. But this lady is nothing short of amazing. She has done a wonderful job and leaves such a legacy for our district. And she's always, I can go to her with something like, well, we have an unusual situation. And if you know my position being special ed, gifted English learners, Title IX, homeless, all of the above, we often run into new and unique situations. Carla's the one that works magic to help us figure out how to accurately report that to the state. She collaborates with every building secretary, building principal, with our EMIS coordinator, and She literally has saved me more times than I can count. Does all of our purchases, does all, I just can't even describe all the things she does. But I love her to pieces. She's a wonderful friend, a kind and warm-hearted person. And I'm telling you the truth, I could come to her and say, oh my goodness, I dropped the ball. This was supposed to be done tomorrow. And I would know she'd stop immediately to help me. No unkind words, no rolling her eyes, no looks like, oh my goodness, she's got too much on her plate again and I'm gonna help her catch up. Just done with kindness, day in and day out. She's remarkable. I love her to pieces. I don't know, it's not gonna be the same without her, but she leaves a legacy that touches students and staff in this district K-12. And she is nothing short of amazing. And we are thrilled that she's going to be able to spend more time with her family, but we can't imagine what it's going to be like to be working without her. Just love her to pieces. Carla Lane, please recognize
So, on behalf of the Board of Education in Grandview Heights, we do have a small token of our appreciation, and it's a wind chime, and it reads, when gentle breezes blow and you hear these wind chimes play, take a moment to remember the many young lives you have touched throughout your working days. With great appreciation and affection, Grandview High School.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
we love you.
And I just want to say a couple words also, really quick. So, I've worked with Carla now the past 7.5 years, but I have worked very in close proximity with Carla for the last, 4 months?
Yes.
And honestly, it is such a blessing and a treasure and so wonderful. I enjoy every day getting to talk with you about your grandchild, about your daughter, your son-in-law, about football, about what to order for our Friday lunches. I'm going to miss you terribly. You really add to our office culture and climate, and your sense of humor and mine, I think, are very similar.
Yes, they are.
Which I thoroughly enjoy, so I'm just going to miss you, dearly.
I thank everybody here, and I am going to miss everybody in Grandview. I moved to Grandview in 1979. I moved out of Grandview in 2008. And in that time, my kids came to school here, K through 12. We were embroiled in the community, and the fact that I got to be here working has just been an extra special treat for me. And I will miss everybody here, and I appreciate everything. A lot. Thank you.
Okay, Haley said we
Oh,
had
yeah,
to
we
get
got your
pictures.
pictures.
Well, and her family
You got it?
too.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
her
yeah, yeah.
family should join her.
Yeah, totally.
Aw.
Yeah, come on up, please.
Well, and her guest of honor
Here,
here.
how about we stand here and face this way, maybe? Just taking the picture.
Hi.
Hey, Carla, you're in the middle.
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. Smile. Thank you.
Thank you. You earned it.
Yeah, that's right.
What's that? Yeah, redheads in the family.
The Bobcat Award was originated in partnership with the Tri-Village Rotary Club, whose motto is service above self. The award is given to an individual or group of individuals who go above and beyond and who make significant contributions to something bigger than themselves. P. Elizabeth Colker has served on Grandview Heights City Council as well as Council's liaison to the Planning Commission. She was involved in the original development agreement of the Grandview Yard, which put in place the framework for ensuring the school district would receive benefits for many years to come, and was also involved in the early efforts of the park's master planning process. She has worked as an independent architect at KMA Design, a principal and partner at M&A, where she specialized in healthcare and higher ed design, and now serves as the city's Director of Planning and Economic Development. In ways more than one, Mrs. Colker's efforts have come full circle, and we are so grateful for her service. Mrs. Colker has been nominated for and selected to receive the Bobcat Award, as well for her invaluable work to ensure a strong collaborative partnership between the district and the city of Grandview Heights as it relates to the overall site plan and adjacent traffic patterns to the 412 academic complex that includes Larson Middle School and Grandview Heights schools. For several years, the city and school district having been working together to collaborate in order to meet the needs of both entities and the overall community as it relates to the final site plan of the school construction project between 1st and 3rd Avenues. Although there have been many people involved in this process, Ms. Colker played a key role in moving the project along and working with all parties involved to get school board approval, planning commission approval, and an MOU executed between the district and the city. This was no easy task, but she took the time to work with each entity, listen to feedback, and move the process forward so that a final plan could be in place and submissions for grant funding by the city could be completed. We are so fortunate to have people like P. Liz who contribute to the overall success of our community. I say on a personal level, having worked in Grandview now, but 8 years, but for P. Liz in the last 8 to 12 months, and her leadership and getting our site plan accomplished and holding us accountable and leading that process, her organizational skills, her professional career, added value, the like of which I can't even explain to you. And as a result, today we have or will have a way better ultimate site plan for our 412 campus. Furthermore, our students will have a safer route to school and walking paths and bike paths, and I just can't thank her leadership enough. And so on behalf of Grandview Heights Schools and the Board of Education, I'd ask P. Liz to come up and receive this award.
I think all I would really say is I stepped into other people's shoes who had already got things going in the right direction and worked with a lot of people who were all pulling in the same direction. And the schools have been great. The city has been great to live in and participate with. I have 3 kids who went through the schools here, and very much appreciate everything the schools do, everything the mayor has done. It's been a great experience transitioning in full-time into community service, and I just appreciate the opportunity, really. And this is more than you needed to ever do, so thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Did I get a picture? Greta, will you come up? Do you mind getting in the picture with us?
We'll send it to you.
He doesn't want to, that's okay too. He's going to take all the, he's the professional picture taker. You're going to get it.
Now it's awkward.
You go first.
While Victor's taking photos, I really would like to say a few words.
Oh, yes, please.
Go ahead, they'll be more natural. That doing something like this requires a lot of not only vision and technical skills, but the ability to, as the superintendent said, listen and really bring people together and take that feedback in and really try to get to the best result. It's only possible if you love the community like Liz does. She's thinking all day and all night about having a community better, so I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the work. Good people.
Maybe a final word to say, Liz, we appreciate your
They're fighting for the trees as well. And part of that legacy will be some great trees when we're done with the project.
The Johannes Tyler Grandview Heights School District Teacher of the Year Award, established by William C. and Gail Ann Johannes, Marble Cliff, in honor of their mothers, Mae Smith Johannes and Charlotte Mulchert Tyler, and their daughter, Emily Johannes Esterling. Mae Johannes taught home economics at Grandview Heights High School and managed the school district's cafeterias from the mid-30s to the mid-40s. Charlotte Tyler, raised in Marble Cliff at 1964 Cardigan Avenue, attended Grandview schools, graduating in 1936. Emily Esterling attended the Grandview schools, graduating from Grandview Heights High School in 1996. The purpose, as authored, to honor with a cash prize the Grandview Heights School District's teacher annually chosen as Teacher of the Year by the staff and administration. Choice of the outstanding teacher should be done annually in accordance with the normal process as determined by the Grandview Heights School District teachers and administration. Should the teacher no longer be chosen as the Grandview Heights School District, well, let me just say this. We are so very thankful, and Mrs. Johannes is present, along with Emily Meister, who's the recipient this year, deservingly so, I might add, as the Teacher of the Year, to have Ms. Johannes partner with the school districts, and of equal importance, her extreme generosity. I would ask Ms. Johannes just to wave to everyone so they know who we are. And this has been in place now, I believe, how long has it been? Five? I was going to say 5, so 4 years. So on behalf of the Board of Education, the entire staff of Grandview Heights Schools, we are indebted to you for your generosity and can't thank you enough. Right. And you love the teachers. So a big round of applause for Ms. Johannes.
Good evening. When it comes to what Emily Meister means to our school, to our students, to our staff, I could talk all night. I really could. So that I don't do that, I prepared some words. I get to work in a building full of amazing student-centered teachers. But in a group of all-stars, Emily Meister, or Meister, as she prefers to be called, stands out. I believe that one of my main responsibilities is to ensure that teachers are not only being reflective in their practice, but that they have the skills and the tools to be reflective. Meister is one of the most reflective teachers I've ever had the privilege to work with. Every day, every period, she's adapting based on what students need. I asked students, because students voted for this award, I asked students why they voted for her for Teacher of the Year. They gave me some looks like, well, how could you not know, Mr. Brown? She's awesome. They all said some version of, she cares about us. Meister treats students like people first and students second, and they know that. They said she has high expectations and pushes us to learn and grow. And with those high expectations comes an enormous level of care and support. I guarantee that right now we could ask her about any single one of the students in her classes, and she would be able to tell you about their academic instructional levels, social emotional needs, foundational needs that will build beyond this year, interests, learning styles. I could go on. Not only would she do anything for students, but she would do anything for staff as well. It's difficult to teach during a pandemic. I won't go into the details about what Meister is doing, only to say that she is helping a lot behind the scenes. I am honored that I get to work alongside Emily Meister.
Emily, you're welcome to say a few words if you'd like.
Okay. I guess, Mrs. Johannes, thank you for everything. It really does mean a lot. Teaching, as Mr. Brown just said, teaching in a pandemic has been an interesting challenge, to say the absolute least. That's probably the nicest way I can say it. So just being recognized for trying my best and understanding how hard this situation is and caring about people is very humbling, and I appreciate everything.
Andy, just to add, so my kids went through high school and appreciated Mrs. Meister, and both in the classroom and with theater as well. And so I texted them and said, give me some ideas here, as part of a testimonial. And Maya wrote back and said she likes coffee. So part of your legacy, all right. I appreciate everything you do.
Well, Mr. Culp, thank you for all three of those presentations. That's just a wonderful way to start our board meeting. I think sometimes we get mired down in the work and sometimes don't do a good enough job recognizing, all the great people we have. Thank you. And it is a Bobcat Award. Everything that Mr. Culp said, we're here because of that. I think back when we passed that bond issue, I think we all envisioned a 2-story flat roof middle school and some sort of hallway connecting, and the whole site plan is icing on the cake. I mean, it's not even what we sold, and so to get better than what we thought is rare, and you're a big part of that. And Emily Meister, recently reminded me that we've known each other 18 years, and
2002.
I think I met Emily before I met my wife back in the day. So Emily, I'm heartfelt and I'm glad that you're part of the Grandview family and that it's been such a good fit for you. So, and it's also been fun. I know that public recognition isn't your favorite thing, and this is about the third time that we've got to watch you sort of squeam through it, but you like being in front of the kids, but it's, I just love that you're part of the Grandview family. So. With that, we are to recognition of guests and hearing of the public. Do we have anybody that wishes to address the board this evening? If not, I will skip my sort of discussion about that, and we'll go into construction update. And for those of you who are recognized, you're more than welcome to stay, but it is not at all rude to scooch out either.
So I'm Colleen Cross with the Co-curricular Elford team. Very glad to be here. Congrats again to everybody on retirement and awards. This is awesome. And also congrats to the Grandview Heights Schools boys soccer team. That is awesome. Kind of want to go watch them play now. We have been busy on the other side of the high school, very busy giving tours to staff and students, which has been a blast, kind of walking through the looking glass a little bit. You'll see a lot of changes in the high school right now. So we're continuing with demolition, working through seeing a bunch of different building types from the 20s to the 50s, 70s, and beyond. So working through a lot of that, which has been fun. Big accomplishments for us. We have started the new windows, so you'll see those as you walk on Fairview Avenue, and then starting next week you'll start to see them come across on 3rd as well. We're starting on the 2nd floor and we'll be working our way downstairs. We are continuing our structural demolition and doing new layout, along with up in the air we've got ductwork and piping. And then we are continuing our BIM coordination, which is where we're modeling the entire building in 3D, just like we did for the middle school, but for the high school. So we anticipate that being done and wrapped up by the end of this year. Also coming up next will be wall layout for masonry walls and drywall walls, and then infilling concrete holes. So a lot to look forward to as we roll into the holidays. Thanks.
Any questions for Colleen? The board did have a chance to walk through the building, and so if you're interested in that, talk to Mr. Culp, or the hard hat updates and the weekly updates on the website, there's not a surface not being ripped out, so. The dumpsters have been flying.
Yes, they have.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you. Thanks.
We do have a COVID-19 mask update that Mr. Culp's going to present right now, and there may be a question of like, why now? And frankly, why now is because when we made the mask decision, we said we would in November, and we wanted to stay true to that. So that's not really based on, necessarily a desire to make a decision right now, but we thought it was important in a public setting to continue to look and have updates. As a reminder, and I said when we passed the resolution, the decision to mask indoors our buildings 24/7 is a board decision. And at some point when that decision changed, then that will also be a board decision. That's not what we're doing tonight. That's not on the agenda. That's not an action item on the agenda. That would take a board member, placing that on the agenda to do that. So I just, we're having this discussion as a touch point because we said we would. It's been a few months. We're about a quarter and a half in the school year. So I sort of wanted to set that groundwork so it was clear what we were doing and why we were doing it.
Thank you. So, as Jesse said, right now, the current resolution in place requires masking indoors 24/7 in all school buildings. At our August 2021 Board of Education meeting, we discussed that at the November meeting, we would review that and assess it. And as Board President Jesse Truitt outlined, we feel at this time the current plan is working well and there's no reason to change that. There are new quarantine protocols in place, and they're calling it now mask to stay. Now, my qualifying statement is that there are many districts that are not currently under a K-12 all indoor resolution of mask requirement. And so for those districts, this notion of new quarantine guidance, calling it mask to stay, is relevant in that if you are a close contact, you must, in order to attend school physically, wear a mask. Given that we are K-12 mask requirement, it is somewhat of a moot change for us because we're already K-12 mask requirement. But in essence, what the mask to stay new policy says is that if you're a close contact, in order to attend school physically, you would be eligible, but you would be required to wear a mask for up to 14 days of the last exposure. You self-monitor or have a parent monitor for symptoms, isolate and get tested if you start to experience symptoms. So the caveat there is if you begin to experience some of the COVID-19 symptoms, obviously you need to test and go home. Consistent with the guidance for other quarantine and lower risk environments, students and staff may discontinue these quarantine procedures after 7 days if they do not develop symptoms and test negative between days 5 and 7. Additionally, there is a test to play. So for extracurricular activities, we will recommend that asymptomatic contacts may continue to participate in extracurricular activities if they do the following: wear a mask when able in locker rooms, transportation, sitting and standing on the sidelines, test on initial notification of exposure to COVID-19, test again days 5 to 7. We will require testing if symptomatic. I will tell you on a personal level, my son is on the JV basketball team in a neighboring district, and I received a direct email indicating that one of his teammates was COVID positive. Correspondingly, as a result of these new regulations, the team is eligible to continue to play. I'm giving you a tangible example of application, provided that no player shows symptoms. Just to give you a real tangible, like personal experience, as of today. I got the email like 2 hours ago. So one of the other things I wanted to do for the board, and full disclosure, I did email, we have a doctor's committee that I do email asking and seeking their advice. Additionally, I do consult with neighboring districts and superintendents. Additionally, Franklin County Public Health, Columbus Public Health, and Ohio Department of Health. One of the things that I've been trying to begin to think about, as well as the board, is a framework for consideration that is non-binding around what might be a criteria of consideration for the board to unmask. And so here's a framework for consideration. A positivity rate below 5%. So right now I believe it's at 6.7 in Franklin County. Case rate below 50 per 100,000. I'm sorry I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember the last update, and we didn't have our normal Tuesday COVID Franklin County Public Health meeting because of the OSBA conference that many of us were in attendance. And then the third one is around this notion of vaccination. And one of the things I think is really important for everyone and the board to be mindful of is eligibility for vaccination for ages 5 to 11 just became available. In fact, we're having our clinic, or hosting a clinic, for Nationwide Children's Hospital for our students. I believe the first day is Monday. So a consideration for the board additionally is some percentage of vaccination, full vaccination. So, you know, I put on here 85 to 90, you know, as a framework for consideration. I do think it important, and I skipped it, is sustained for 4 weeks. So this idea of a below 5% positivity rate and 50,000 per 100,000 sustained for 4 weeks, because as all of you know, because you all read, I know, my weekly updates where I give positivity rate, case rate, so on and so forth, it does tend to go up and down, you know, up and down. Now we are seeing generally, you know, we had been seeing generally a trend down. I think it's ticked up a little bit. And so sustained for 4 weeks is important. In other words, as a framework for consideration, if we hit it 1 week, I don't think it would be prudent to do a 180. I do think this notion of a 4-week sustained is something that we all should be mindful of and consider. One of the things that I am asked about regularly and that we do discuss as a leadership team, principals, myself, is we currently are masking on recess. And so one of the core rationale that I presented behind why we were doing that was eligibility for a modified quarantine. If you were a close contact, if you're masked on school property, grounds, playground included, you were eligible for a modified quarantine. Under these new guidances, or this new quarantine guidance, that core rationale is really no longer applicable. However, it is the leadership team's belief and the principal's team belief for 2 core reasons that we should continue to mask at recess. The first is if we do unmask, anyone that is a close contact would be required to wear a mask on recess, which creates a whole nother layer of oversight, accountability, spreadsheet, and who's going to do that, monitoring, and furthermore, you know, asking someone who's a close contact to wear a mask on recess when others aren't could present some challenges. And so for that, as a reason, not the reason, we felt it was best to continue. The other reason, and this was really a bigger reason, is that, now it was a week ago when we were discussing this, but we are at the precipice of now 5 to 11 are eligible to be vaccinated, and we thought it prudent to stay the course for now and revisit this after we've given an opportunity for our ages 5 to 11 to be vaccinated, and then revisit that at that time. So those were our 2 core reasons for continuing that for now. We are monitoring it closely. Again, we are hosting a Pfizer vaccine, Nationwide Children's Hospital, November 15th from 9 to 2, and then the second dose will be December 2nd. So we have seen reductions in the positivity rate and the case rate, although it has ticked up just a little bit. Positivity rate I have on here is 5.3. That's gone up a little bit. Our CATS data, so CATS data is specific to the 43212 zip code. We've also seen, interestingly, that increase, and then we also saw a decrease this last week. So that, I will say, because of the sample size, we see typically a more radical up and down in our 43212 data than Franklin County seems to be just generally, while there are ups and downs, it's generally a little more steady. Last I checked, our district dashboard was showing 2 COVID positive cases. So that, in a nutshell, is my masking, quarantine, COVID update for the board. I'd be glad to answer and take any questions.
I got a few if someone wants to get in first.
I have several too, so it doesn't matter. I mean,
I don't have any.
go ahead. You go ahead, Molly.
All right. Thank you. Couple things. Thank you for doing the vaccination, offering our schools as a site Monday. I know that Governor DeWine spoke about vaccinations are the key to getting through this, and he personally thanked school districts for hosting sites for kids to get vaccinated. So I'm just going to go ahead on behalf of all of us. Thank you for doing that because it means a lot to our community. On transportation, isn't it a mandate that students have to be masked? Like, that's not our call, correct?
Yeah, currently, I believe that is a requirement, a
Right.
federal requirement.
So
Planes, transportation, et cetera, yes.
So even if we were to decide to unmask the transportation, so it's kind of one of those like.
As I understand
Okay.
it, unless ODH has changed that or some sort of federal regulation.
I mean, I don't know if the federal travel, because
Yeah.
when they did airplanes, it covers school buses.
It
It's
did.
all the same
It did.
category, so.
It did. I believe that's still in place, but I'm
It
I'm
is.
like
It
90%,
is.
I'm not 100.
Well, that was one of those when you were talking about like on transportation, I'm like, I don't think that's an us call thing. With our vaccinations, how are you going to, how are you going to measure that with staff and students? Students, I think, is a little easier, but how do you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we've had a lot of discussions about that. So here's where we are today. Christina Brannon, our HR coordinator, is asking all vaccinated staff to turn in their vaccination cards in a confidential way to her. So she's keeping track of that and correspondingly is able to monitor that. Now, is it possible that some vaccinated staff haven't done that? Turned it in? It is. Our percentages are high relative to Franklin County in terms of vaccination rate. You know, the validity and reliability is, I think, accurate, but is it exact? No. Additionally, what we've talked about for students is doing a survey and carving out time, you know, K-12, where teachers ask students to take it during, you know, a study center or class time, but in a supervised way. It would be anonymous, but a way to gauge the percentages of students vaccinated. We haven't done that yet because the 5 to 11 are yet to be vaccinated. But those were our 2 core thoughts of how we would gauge the percentage of vaccinated.
But we do know vaccination rates from the county, so we would know the vaccination rate of 5 to 11-year-olds without asking the individuals, right?
Yeah, so
Like
you
that
can't.
data would be available
You could go to
from
the Franklin County Public
If
Health.
that's a part of the framework you want to use.
You could go to the Franklin County Public Health website right now and look at vaccination rates for 43212, for example.
So we'll, I mean, there's
Yeah,
some
there's
exceptions
a
to
myriad of
that.
ways, of course, to look at it, yes.
Would parents, guardians be allowed to submit vaccination cards the way that parent, and I'm thinking right now, I'm like, my 10-year-old would be able to tell you, a 5-year-old, who knows? And I say that lovingly,
Yeah.
but would that be another element which parents could do that?
Yes.
'Cause it,
Yeah.
like
And
we used to
Amy
do-
Elliott, our lead nurse, would handle that.
Right, 'cause
Yes.
there's what, 7?
And I think she's begun with
Vaccinated?
some of our, you know, seventh grade to 12th grade to
Okay.
do some of that already.
Because I mean, there's 7 mandated vaccinations to be eligible for public school, 7, I believe. Like, so just checking with that. And then with that, it's a 2-parter. Volunteers will be in the schools and around our kids. Is that gonna be a thing that we're gonna need to mandate? Like, our volunteers have to go through a background check also. Would we just add that as a compliance piece? Like, you can't volunteer? It's, I don't know that and you can say I don't have an answer for
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
that's something should we think about it?
Yeah,
And my understanding would be that would be a board policy change.
Okay.
So right
that's-
now, the policy is a volunteer does not have to be vaccinated or show proof of vaccine or test.
yeah.
Is that
So
for,
the board can make that policy.
Yeah, and I think, I also would just add, I have had some conversations with the board's legal counsel about that, and it is, I think asking that question presents some legal challenges of adults that don't work here.
I don't have an answer in my head for
Yeah.
what I was looking for you to say. I'm just, have we had the
Yeah,
conversation?
yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd say like, if I was allowed to volunteer in a classroom again, if I gave a vaccination card, I'd do it in a heartbeat. However, we require 7 vaccinations for students to be in school. We presently don't require adult volunteers to have any vaccinations to volunteer in a classroom.
That was gonna be part of my, and I couldn't remember, because it's like, I use my educator one, so I have everything. So I'm like, do we ask our parent, guardian, community volunteers for vaccination status? And that answer is no.
Right,
Correct.
That's correct.
So if we were, and that, like I said, there's not a right or wrong answer, I'm just, are we talking about it? And then my final question, series of, is any group recommending unmasking? The American Association of Pediatrics, the CDC, is anyone right now being like,
Yeah.
we're good?
Yeah,
Because I
so-
remember in June, everyone's like, we're okay.
Yeah, so Franklin County Public Health, ODH, Columbus Public Health are all still strongly recommending masking,
Okay.
K-12. Additionally, our doctors group of physicians that live in Grandview and Marble Cliff are still recommending the same, the majority that I heard from. I do want to just add one other point that I neglected to say in my presentation. There were a couple doctors, and obviously no one knows, but they hypothesized that the willingness of parents to get their son or daughter ages 5 through 11 vaccinated may not be as strong as 12 through 18. And I had 2 physicians in particular hypothesize that. And part of their rationale was this weighing by the parent of risk versus, vaccination. So my sense is in Grandview, there will be a large percentage that chooses to do that, but there were 2 physicians that specifically did say that, so that's something we'll have to monitor.
If any indicator of trying to find an appointment is valid for this one, I'm like that, we may not have that trouble, because it might have taken some of us a few days scouting the interwebs to find appointments, just throwing that out there. But I'm good with my questions.
One other thing, we are requiring parents or a parent or guardian to be present for ages 5 to 11 when we're hosting the Nationwide Children's Hospital vaccination.
Seems wise to me. That vaccination rate is a part of the framework, though, and I know like the framework is sort of theoretical now, but I know that there have been a number of doctors who've questioned whether that should be a part of the framework, whether if the positivity rate and the case rate alone and the sustaining for 4 weeks is enough to satisfy that. Because if you are achieving that regardless of vaccination rate, perhaps that alone. Conversely, I think if you had a high vaccination rate, but perhaps weren't meeting those other 2, that might be a call of like, but we have a high vaccination rate, so maybe we should go ahead. I don't necessarily, in my opinion, think that all of those things in conjunction are like the requirements. Does that make sense?
It does. I would even say, first off, excellent point. Thank you for mentioning that. My sense was that, let me say it this way. My sense was from Franklin County Public Health and Columbus Public Health in particular, that their preference would be not to include vaccination rate, but to focus on case rate and positivity rate. I think the doctors group was a little more balanced, but in a non-reliable survey, 50% agreed with Franklin County Public Health and Columbus Public Health in not using vaccination rate as part of the unmasking framework.
Right.
And I would just ask, and Andy, you and I talked about this, and part of the reason we were asking the doctors, is does the vaccination rate actually make having a kid unmasked safer? Or are we back channeling that in a way to try to, get more people vaccinated, which isn't really our mission and purpose.
Right.
So I would say, if you're using that as a framework, really answer the question about our safety here, not try to use that as a tool
Right.
for something else that we may all believe in, but that's not our mission and vision.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, because as far as I'm concerned, I just want to see that fewer people, that, less and less people are getting sick, and those that are getting sick are not getting sick seriously. And so, that's just the goal, simply, is like, we'll feel more comfortable without masks as soon as that happens.
Yeah.
But also then, the recess masking piece. I completely understand and support the idea of waiting for the younger kids to have the opportunity to be fully vaccinated and have that take effect, which won't, really, you're looking at the holiday break at this point, at earliest. But I am curious, and I don't know if you know this, but why the FCPH and perhaps that's the only reason why, but if they have an expanded reasoning for why they recommend recess masking.
Yeah, so the specific answer I got to that, which I did ask, was if you can't maintain 6 feet of distancing on recess, then we recommend masking.
And I just think, I have to point out, though, where it doesn't mesh, though, with the sports recommendations. And that's been frustrating throughout the pandemic when it comes to the health departments. I feel like there's inconsistencies in their recommendations. You can flat out have a positive case on a sports team inside and say, go ahead, continue to play unmasked together as a group.
But that's
Yet we're
politically
telling
pushed
kids-
on the back end. That's not really the health department's recommendation. Their bosses and the politicians
Well, I
on
know,
the back end are pushing that, and it's
But
gonna do that.
regardless of what's real or not, that's the words that are coming out officially.
Yeah.
And so it makes no sense to me. And so, I mean, quite frankly, I think that most kids in elementary school, when the bell's rung, are outside playing without masks on. And I'm fully supportive of masking in school. I'm fully supportive of everyone being vaccinated if you're eligible for vaccination. But I do feel like I'm getting real frustrated with the differences in what's being recommended for sports versus for kids at recess. And I know that's not you, but just generally speaking, I mean, as we hear it from people in the community saying, this makes no sense, and it makes no sense. So if they're comfortable with the basketball team playing when they've been practicing all week unmasked with a kid who just tested positive, you're telling me a kindergartner can't play at recess outside. It just seems real silly to me. But with that said, I do support the idea that we continue to mask until they've all had a chance to be vaccinated, if you so choose. And I feel like, at some point in time, and I don't know when we flip the switch or whatnot, even things like positivity rate and case rate are going to have to switch to hospitalization rate or things like that, because in time, everyone is saying it's not going to go away. It's just going to be a matter of it being reduced and becoming less serious. But, it can't be in perpetuity that we are continually looking at a case rate and a positivity rate, and that at some point in time, the thresholds will switch. But yeah, in any case, right now, I'm completely supportive of continuing to mask, but we'll just have to keep revisiting.
I thought of a question, unless you gentlemen have one. May I ask the principals over there, how is masking going in the schools? Anything? Kid- We're not having compliance issues? No chin diapers, nothing? Perfect.
Yeah.
But it's not the disruption that people had thought it was gonna be, and we're not getting mask fatigue, we're just happy little campers. All right. Okay, I'm really done this time.
So do we have, are we gonna officially schedule another time to revisit it, or are we just going to kind of keep an eye on, as a board? I mean, at this point, it sounds like unless anyone says differently, it sounds like we're kind of thinking that we're gonna let, you know, all these kids get vaccinated and kind of see where things land.
If I
So-
remember,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
when we said earlier, the resolution stays until someone
Yeah.
brings it up.
Right.
So we're here till we decide not to be. Yeah, and then this would be related to that, or this would be a different measure?
Well, I think Emily's question is does the board sort of decide to revisit this so it's on the calendar so you don't sort of lose track of
Right,
it?
like we did in
My
August.
suggestion would be, you'll have a January organizational meeting where you set your calendar for the year, and then at that point, you may decide like, hey, let's, in February or March, let's sort of revisit where we are, or maybe sooner or later. But,
Yeah.
you know, I don't see any decision in the imminent future or next month, so I would say, you know, when you've got a different board in January, why don't you determine at that point? We can determine it now if you want.
And I would just add to Jesse's comment, I think that's prudent. We need to continue on a weekly basis to monitor positivity rate and case rates.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of the 4-week trend. And once we see even a week's worth of being below 50 per 100,000, well, then you can make it an agenda item.
Right,
But until we're there, there's no sense setting a date now.
right.
I think that makes sense, because to me, I'm like, there's no point in talking about it even before February, so.
Yeah, unless there's some sudden turn of events, which has not been what we've been seeing,
Don't
but.
say those words out
But
loud.
no, it could, I mean,
No.
there was the huge peak last winter, and then this peak was like slightly smaller, so I'd like to see that trend continue
good
until it
now.
gets real small.
I like Mr. Gousset's idea.
All right. Anything else for Mr. Call?
Do you want to speak, Mr. Bodie? Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Just push the arrow every like 5 minutes. Try to keep it awake.
So I am excited to share a little bit with you today about what I consider to be a success story. The state report card has no grades on it at all. But we can celebrate without grades because there are lots of things to celebrate. So we're going to start with student achievement. Andy always says student achievement is where it's at. That's the performance of our students against state standards, and it includes all of our students, grades 3 through 12. And our performance index measures that achievement, and we were at 101.1, which is the highest in Franklin County, I think at least by 6 points. It's the top 4% in the state.
Is now where we clap or no?
Also, then when you look at achievement, this chart, the state of Ohio kind of puts 20 districts as your similar and like districts. So if you see any areas in bold, that means all of those areas in bold are where we outperformed our similar and likes in achievement. If you see the green mark, or the green highlighted boxes, that shows you where our students achieved at the same rate they did in 18-19 or higher. There are 2 yellow places where we didn't quite score as well as we have in achievement in the past. But there's some things to be said about that. Number one, those are 2 areas in 5th grade math and 8th grade math where we accelerate. So there are lots of children taking 6th grade math or accelerating into pre-algebra and algebra. So the other thing that we found across the state when looking at data is that math was a little bit lower across the state versus ELA. And we think that that is because parents are more comfortable supporting ELA than they are in math in a virtual environment. So I'm not really worried about those 2 scores much, because you'll see 2 as I go to progress, and this is your value added, children growing a year. They did grow a year's worth of growth. They might not have achieved as high as we would have liked them to, but they did meet a year's worth of growth. So if you look at this, the green areas, students met expected growth. The dark green areas are students exceeded expected growth. The yellow area, still students met expected growth, but it was at the lower end of expected growth. And then science, you'll notice in 8th grade, did not meet expected growth. However, That is, our 8th graders are taking high school physical science in 8th grade and then taking an 8th grade test. Again, that's a really hard course to teach half day every day and get all of the content in. So again, not something I'm really concerned about, but excited that our kids met their year's worth of growth. This, I wish we had a grade for. This would be the first year that we could say we closed the gap for every single one of our subgroups. Every single one of our subgroups. Special education, socially or economically deprived, Hispanic, multi-ethnic. We hit every student met their target, and that is something to be very excited about. This did not happen in many districts this year. This was the area that was probably hit the hardest. 3rd grade early literacy, again, we passed all of our 3rd graders on to 4th grade. They all achieved their goals. The way that reading is tracked is students are given a diagnostic test at the beginning of the year within the first 30 days of whenever they enter school. And then from that score, children are decided whether they're on track or off track. So when you see these numbers here at the end, the goal then every year is to move less of those kids and get them on track versus off track. So again, 100% of our kids passed. Prepared for success, another place I wish we really did have a grade this year. We had a 97.2%, and it placed us in the top 1% of the state. We were in the top 2.6% of ACT free, or ACT remediation free. We are 2nd in honors, our children receiving honors diplomas, 10th in AP exams with a score of 3 or better, and our kiddos earned 12 credits in College Credit Plus classes. And I think sometimes we undersell AP and College Credit Plus as a tax saving. I'm just going to share with you my own experience. So 12 credits could mean that your child is starting as a middle freshman in college their first year. My daughter started as a sophomore in college, and that doesn't mean they have to speed the process up and graduate in 3 years, but when kids are like, I wanted to be in marketing, but now I want to be in something else, it gives them that leeway to do that and still graduate in 4 years. So it is a really amazing thing that we're providing for our students and our families. AP, 305 exams, and 66.67% of our kids got a 3 or higher. And to me, that is amazing because the AP content is a lot. And to teach that content, it's strenuous in half days, is absolutely amazing. We ascended to 568. The year before we were back up to 1,008. We're at 568 and we're 19th in the state. And during the pandemic, we still really considered the whole child. It started with, we all need to be in school half day every day. And high school principal and middle school team and high school teachers saying, sure, we'll figure out how to teach half days. We have no idea how to make that happen, but we will. We still focused on all of our learning attributes, making sure our kids are still being prepared to make decisions and be resilient. We have lots already in place of experiential opportunities. STEM centers and all the media centers, that happened during the pandemic. We were able to transform the elementary and middle school media centers into STEM centers where kids can visit every day. We have lots of different activities. So, and then also we've kept in mind those social and emotional skills, and we've added new curriculum like systems of strength for our 4 through 8 population. So we still considered the whole child. So that was our success story, and I am so proud of the work that we did, but it all changes next year. There are no more ABC grades. They are moving to a 5-star system. It is not determined yet, but the state of Ohio believes that they will also do half stars. So you could get 4.5 stars, kind of like Yelp. And the descriptors will be present at all times. Things that will still be calculated next year for us will be achievement, and that is the major metric. So achievement will still be there. Value added or progress will still be there, but they have not decided how they're calculating that exactly yet. Gap closing will be there, and the group size for subgroups used to be 25, and they've shrunk it to 15, which I think does benefit us. Graduation is still there, and then early literacy is changing. We used to play this game where you put all kids like that were close on a RIMP, but there weren't kids we were necessarily worried about, but a RIMP is a reading improvement and monitoring plan. But you didn't want to end up short on, so they're taking that off. There will be no penalties for students who don't have RIMPs, which is phenomenal. And it'll be a combination of proficiency, progress, and promotion. Now, things that will get on the report card but won't be counted into those stars is formally prepared for success, that we did so well, is now not going to be graded. So they're figuring that out. It'll be in 2025. It will be graded, but there will be some measures reported, just not calculated into the star grade. KRA is the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. That's never really been reported. It will now be reported, but not calculated into the early literacy grade. They will report now the number of graduates we have that started as freshmen and ended as seniors. So that will be reported. And then there's new categories for students who didn't graduate. Students who didn't graduate who are on IEPs, students who didn't graduate that took no credit recovery classes, so there will be new categories there. For some reason, they're going to report how many of our kids do the FAFSA forms for college. And then there is now PBIS indicators. We have really strong PBIS programs in the elementary, and so we'll have to do a little bit more of that in the middle school as well, and those indicators will be on there. And then we will also be reported on how well we support our students with counselors, mental health specialists, and paraprofessionals. Those are some of the new things coming. And that's all I have. Does anyone have questions?
Questions for Angie?
Thank you.
Well, I certainly appreciate you sharing that, and the 10,000-foot view is a success story. We can talk all day long about whether we want to assess students, but we do have a touch point for reading and math every year by the state, and I think that's good data to look at and see where we're at. So I feel good about that, and I also know that this team will really dissect those areas for improvement and get in there. So as much as the big picture is a success story, the data is only as good as it drives your practice. So I'm certainly excited about that. I know that we were as a district that didn't have transportation, very fortunate that we could have our kids in school every day, even if the time was shortened, and focus on reading and math, those core subjects with everything else. So thanks for sharing that today. It's great news. It's in a way, the leadership and the teachers deserve a ton of credit for that, but so does our community. At this level, we fight a little bit about masks and these sorts of things, but at the end of the day, the parents were an integral part of that success. And when you look at PIs across the state, I think dropped an average of 17 points, and the reading and math achievement in our urban districts. I mean, it's a problem, and it makes you realize how privileged we are to live here, and have the great things that we have. I mean, in a way, compared to what kids that live 2 miles that way score. It's not to make it depressing, but it's really I think we should all just really reflect on what we have, and the parents and the schools and everybody together making these things happen. So thank you for all the work you do, Angie. I know you're relatively new in this role, and we're excited to see where we are in a year.
Yeah, so I just also want to piggyback on Board President Truitt's comments and say what an amazing team effort this was, and it's a manifestation of the collective efficacy of the community, of every single employee that works in this district, our teachers, our students, our families, and but for all of that, we would not have achieved what we were able to through this pandemic. And I think Jesse's also accurate in saying that many other similar like districts weren't able to maintain what we were. And it's all of those things. And to do it through a pandemic, and I think Emily's comments earlier are on point in that it is uncharted water and exceedingly challenging to do that as a teacher. And so our teachers do deserve a huge amount of credit. I also think, as Jesse mentioned, and remiss in mentioning, and actually Angie Olam was a huge proponent and advocated for it. It is the ultimate design challenge, and people say this, building the airplane while you're flying it all the time. I'm sure all of you have heard that analogy. Well, in the pandemic, that is really what you were doing. And by the ultimate design challenge, it was uncharted water to create a hybrid schedule. And, one of the things I say ultimately is, we always put kids first. And everybody says that. What's best for kids? What's best for kids? Well, ultimately, where we put the stake in the ground was our AM/PM hybrid schedule of having kids physically present for 3 hours every day is best for kids socially, emotionally, behaviorally, and academically. And even though we're the only district doing it, that's what's best for kids. And we're going to defend it. And that's what we did. And I will just tell you, because we were one of the only ones, I went home that night when we declared it, and I said, Deb, I don't know if I'll have a job next week because we are the only district doing this, but I do think it's best for kids. And I just applaud the leadership team working collaboratively with our staff to create that model because it was best for kids. I applaud our teachers for being malleable and flexible and adaptable and growth-minded and accepting the challenge. Our custodians and parapros for cleaning before and during the break and after school. Our kitchen for delivering meals at home and being innovative and creative in sack lunches and pickup times. It really is remarkable, and the culmination of which we see here. So many people to thank and applaud.
Andy, just to, maybe tie the last two topics together. You could easily look at all the decisions that school boards made, and you could either be on the safe side and keep everyone home and suffer academically, or you could take health risks and send kids to school and keep them on track. And there is something of an either or, and I think statistically what we're seeing here is we got the best of both worlds, that we stayed on track academically much better, and we also stayed healthier than most. I mean, the statistics that we have, certainly we have had sicknesses, but if it's not zero, it's almost zero transmission at the school. And I think so we've been very successful in that. So those two together are a really remarkable story.
And I think if I remember right, when it came to it, we were between an AB schedule with middle school and high school, and I think elementary one at AM/PM, and there was someone who advocated for, let's make it simple. Let's keep kids in as much as we can. And I believe that was you, my friend.
Yeah. Kevin was also pretty strong.
I don't remember him. Okay,
Yeah.
gentlemen.
Well, everyone ultimately, right?
Well, okay.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
one of those that, because I can remember there was a look on your face when it was like AM/PM, and you were like, okay. And it was, but
Well, I
you
mean-
will, you go.
It sure is nice to see that number on the board. The proof is in the pudding, right? But we owe our community a debt of gratitude as well for being flexible and for trusting us. And I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, and our parents, a lot of our students who needed special education, we were able to actually do that double dip, and we were able to, parents would come get them, take them home for lunch, and bring them back for more instruction. And without parents, we couldn't have made that happen either. So, yeah, we're all very blessed to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Dig in here a little bit. Let's do two separate votes. If I could have a motion to accept the minutes for the regular meeting on October 6th, 2021, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussions on those minutes? Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
Also would like to Have a motion to accept the minutes for the special meeting on October 11th, 2021, where we made a few personnel hires at that point. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.
All right, building and department reports. Any questions or discussions for the reports included in the packet?
I had two things, neither of which I think is all that lengthy, but the first one, I was very interested to see that there's a mention of a tracking system for students after high school.
Yeah, that was on my list of questions too. Yeah,
And
the
I-
National Student Clearinghouse, I think I had.
Really
written down.
thrilled to see that, and just wanted to hear if there's any other information that could be talked about with that.
I can't remember how I worded that, but we're about there. We haven't done it yet, but we're working with them to, we have to get something in place, so that seems like the best option. So we're getting some presentations, looking at some options, some packages, going back and forth, costs, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's probably the program that we'll use.
Okay, so it sounds like,
Task is to, as you know, to track after graduation, but this seems like the best program for that.
do you know the scope of that? Is it only for students that go on to further schooling, or is it more wide than that?
As you might know, I'm not sure. Right now they're focusing, the conversations I'm having with them is focusing mostly on the kids who go to college, not so much career, but we're looking at, I think they're looking at expanding that too.
So we are looking at that and possibly another tool as well for more of the college, for more of the career path. Right now, it's 1 and 2 year, it does do technical schools and 4-year institutions, so, but it doesn't do military or career path. So we are looking at another tool, and if they'd all put it in one thing, it'd be one great tool, but we haven't found that yet. So we are looking at a couple things.
Well, great to see that. I'm very interested in whatever we need to do to support that. And the other quick thing is just a reminder for the acronyms that I get lost sometimes with some of what's written, and appreciate having this spelled out.
Yes, on that same note, can somebody tell me what BLT stands for? Aside from bacon, lettuce, and tomato. Okay, all right. I should have guessed that. No, it's fine.
You can have
I think I know most of the others now, but I was thrown for that one. I must have been hungry when I read it.
DLT is the district leadership team.
And I'm a
She kept
vegetarian.
BLTs. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the building or department reports? Committee reports. It's not on the agenda, but it's probably a good spot for it, right? Any committee report updates? I have a couple, but. Well, I guess we'll start with the core team. You know, we continue to meet bi-weekly now with the larger construction team and then a smaller team. And one of the things we discussed, we know as a board, at one time there was sort of a list of potential expenses and things that we may want to think of through the high school project. And now that we're well into demo and sort of know what we've hit and we haven't hit, we would like to at some point, not to add another meeting in a busy November, December, but sort of reevaluate where we are, because I feel like last time, sort of unintentionally, the core team was holding certain information and all of a sudden we were at a decision point. So I think we have a lot of items where we're not at a decision point, but it might be a good time to sort of reassess and discuss and say, hey, here are things to keep an eye on for the next, 12 months of construction as we go in. So, and Katie, we'd love for you to participate in that. So we will probably try to circulate and figure out a date to make that work if we can in the near future. The one thing that we can discuss at that meeting that's coming up, and although it's expense, I think it's good news. We've talked about in the past the tuck pointing, and to be clear, what we're not doing is tuck pointing the entire high school. Most of the brickwork's in good enough shape that doesn't need at that time, but there were certain repairs that weren't part of the scope of the project. And so at this point, Doug Addis and our owner's rep has really dug in, and there's the total cost to take care of all the sort of fixing of any brickwork and expansion joints and all those things on high school is $70,000, of which $40,000 we had an allowance. So that's a $30,000 to $35,000 expense that, in my opinion, is well worth it. You don't want a year after we open this building, put scaffolding up and fix chimneys, and so a lot of that is is actually the newer chimneys on the high school need a lot of work, and there's just some other touch point that really keeps from water infiltration. And Doug had mentioned if the board would approve that sooner rather than later, that's a contract that there's points throughout the next year it makes sense to do parts of that work. So it's not like they come in all at once and leave. They want to figure it in the programming. So I'd imagine the core team potentially bringing that to the board December to get that rolling for that change. Which honestly I thought that was going to be like $150,000 number. So I'm pleased that that we're down to that, and I think that's money well spent. Am I missing anything else from the construction team?
I don't think so.
And then I had the opportunity and really appreciate to join a teaching and learning committee that I hadn't been on in a number of years, and sort of as I round up my board service, appreciated doing that. Had a great conversation, obviously, not making any decisions, but we talked about sort of really dug into some of those summer programs that we talked about at the board work session, and is there the potential to maybe pilot some of this stuff this summer or not, and talked a little bit about some international baccalaureate programming, some of the younger grade levels, and so I just really encourage, as we get into the following year, that committee continue to meet regularly and can continue to dig into those things. I think we have a lot of important stuff to talk about during a pandemic and during a construction project, but I think we almost want to make that the core work of what we're talking about. So I appreciate you guys humoring me and letting me attend one of those meetings towards the end, and I really enjoyed that and look forward to seeing sort of where that work goes. Kevin, I don't know if you want to add anything from our discussions.
It was nice to just hear some new options and considerations for the future.
Oh. All right, anything?
I'll just add with the finance committee, so we had a meeting last month, and I know Beth will talk about things, but a particular focus is on the health insurance and health costs. So we did something of a deeper dive into that with a lot more to come, but just wanted to let the other committee members know, that the finance committee has been involved with Beth on that, and Beth's doing a great job of a wider dialogue and keeping us up to date on that. And then also, I think it's next Monday, we have our next meeting.
It's Monday.
And also talking about the RFP that we have out and making next steps on that.
Excellent.
And we spent quite a bit of time, in the last several meetings, talking about change orders for the project, the facilities project, and that's coming up later in the agenda also.
Yeah, and I think what you see here is there's certainly a lot of commonality and flow between the finance committee and the core team, and there should be. Obviously you guys will do whatever you want in January, but I'd say I think it's important that that's not the same two board members. I think it's good to have different perspective. It is convenient, I think, and efficient to have one that maybe jumps back and forth between the two, but there's a lot, we're spending a lot of money, and there's a project that has to be managed, and you gotta spend hours on that every week, and so it can't fall to just two people to do both of that in both those committees. So. Okay, superintendent's report, Mr. Culp.
I just want to begin by saying, there was a long board campaign, and I want to applaud all of the candidates that ran. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there and campaign. And so I applaud all of them that did, and a special congratulations to Katie, who's in our audience, who will join our board in January, as well as Molly and Eric. So congratulations to you three. Want to also just mention Carter Black, our National Honor Commended Scholar. Congratulations to Carter. A big shout out, and I did see Carrie Millette, but she must have left. Her son is on the boys varsity soccer team. And I know Mr. Bodie and myself attended, and maybe some others, last night, and it was an awesome, well, Victor, I saw Victor there. Awesome soccer game. Spectacular soccer game, at least from a Grandview Bobcat standpoint. And they play for the state title this Saturday at 1 in the Crew Stadium. And remarkably, just a fun fact, in the over 100-year of Grandview schools, they've never won a team state title, which is really remarkable. But this is a tremendous opportunity and really history and potentially in the making. So very exciting on Saturday. If you're able to attend, contact Brad Bertani for tickets. He'll send you the link. Also, congratulations to our girls cross country team who did wonderful. I wanted to just introduce Jim Buffer. Jim, if you wouldn't mind waving. Jim is on tonight's board agenda to serve as the Director of Operations. Jim comes to Grandview by way of Lancaster and Upper Arlington schools and serves as a teacher, assistant principal, athletic director, and principal. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we feel very grateful and fortunate to have you on board. So thank you, Jim. Want to thank Amy Elliott, our head nurse, and everyone else who behind the scenes is going to make the Nationwide Children's Hospital Clinic on Monday, first round for ages 5 to 11 work. Special thanks to Beth Collier for her great work on the financial prospectus, as well as Haley Head for the newsletter. And then just special shout out are the superintendent's next coffee. Mark your calendars, is Friday, November 19th at 8:30. And it will be right up outside of my office. And just as a incentive, last time at the superintendent's coffee, you got a special behind the scenes tour of the renovated high school. And likely that might just happen again. So mark your calendars.
Any questions for Andy? You did such a good job. No one's asking anything. Beth, you're up.
Okay, so I have shared my presentation on the screen to your right. And just want to start out with a few financial updates, and I've got a couple other things I want to touch on and share as well. So our general fund, really the only thing that I wanted to point out here, we're right on track with where we expect to be at this point in terms of revenue. Our interest revenue for the month was about $7,500. Our expenditures are at about 31.7% of our fiscal year budget. We're about 33% of the way through the year, so we're right on target, just a bit under. And the investments that we have in our general fund, the weighted average yield, the investments that we have outstanding are at about 1.15%. So we continue to try to do everything we can to maximize interest earnings in a very, very low interest rate environment. Permanent Improvement Fund. The only thing new on this slide that I wanted to share is under the current needs. I have shared about the high school roof project that is going to be done in conjunction with our high school renovation. There is a change order on the agenda for tonight related to that roofing project. And what we have run into is the contractor doing that roof has encountered, with the price of building materials right now, there are some significant risks in terms of cost escalation of materials. So we worked pretty closely with our legal counsel to update the language in that contract so that it allows that contractor to move forward with that work and gives them some protection in terms of cost escalation without us writing a blank check for an indefinite amount, which we can't do. So, so we have included a 20% increase clause in that change order to allow for increased costs. And we would only honor that increased cost with evidence of that cost escalation. So, so that is on the agenda for tonight. So that does potentially increase that $250,000 project to about $300,000.
So I don't forget later, can I say, so is that 300,000, is that like a ceiling?
That is a ceiling, yes.
Okay.
So that difference, that extra $50,000 represents 25% of that contract, and it is the ceiling.
Right. I just
So-
wanted to make sure that I was understanding correctly.
Yes, that's exactly right, Emily. That's a great question. So, as a school district, as a public entity, we can't give them write a blank check, give them an indefinite amount. So we did agree, they were amenable to the 20% allowance there for that.
But they would have to show proof of that increased expenditure in order to get that amount exceeding the original 250.
That's correct. And if the price did not, because right now they're ordering materials that they're going to be using in the project in the spring, so 6 months out from now. And so that gives them some protection in terms of what we're seeing with the escalation of building material costs. So that's really the only thing new with the permanent improvement fund that I wanted to share. Going on to the construction fund, our October interest earnings were just over $33,000. And our project to date, so since our bonds were issued back in 2019, we have earned about $1.6 million in interest earnings on those invested proceeds while the project is being done. Soft costs, construction costs, you can see our fund balance is down to about $22.5 million. Of course, that is gradually decreasing as we pay for the work that's being done. And the investments that we have staggered out in the construction fund through the end of the project have about a 1.75% yield to maturity. I updated this facility funding source to reflect our current month interest. And the only other thing that I wanted to mention here, we will likely have an update next month with the November report. The additional funds from the city for the site enhancements, I'm actually expecting those tomorrow. Today was a bank holiday, and I know that they have submitted that. So we do expect to have those. I think I mentioned before that based on revised code, we do have to put those funds in our PI fund, but it'll all be used for that same purpose. So. And then finally, I wanted to share a little bit about the bond retirement fund in that millage setting process. So we talked about this last November. The millage for a bond levy is evaluated and set each year. It's a little bit different than any other type of levy, our general fund or our PI levies. The bond millage follows a process, a several-step process that takes place, and is based on the amount of money that we actually need to make the principal and interest payments. So it's not based on millage or property values or anything like that. It's strictly calculated, it's backed into by starting with how much do we need to make that debt payment next year. So again, that's a certification process that we go through with the county auditor. They ask, how much do you have on hand right now? How much do you need to make your payments next year? And do you have any other sources of revenue to help make those? Typically, school districts do not, but uniquely, we do with the Grandview Yard. So that process usually starts early November. The county auditor will calculate, based on the information that I certify, will calculate a rate by mid to late November. And it's then sent to the school district to sign off on or agree to. And then that new millage rate goes into effect in the next calendar year. So specifically, under that framework, looking at our 2018 bond levy, our Board of Education passed a resolution, I believe the month before that election, designating funds from the Grandview Yard, any additional funds that we got from that renegotiation to be earmarked to help offset these debt payments. And one of the questions that came up during that time, from several community members was, how do we know that, or how does that process work, and how do we know that you're going to use that extra money and follow that resolution? And so this certification process, we shared with the community, and we made a commitment that we would share this publicly each year during this bond levy, this millage setting process. So, what I wanted to share in regards to that is, as part of that process, I certified what our balance is currently, and that we're gonna have about $900,000 of Grandview Yard funds that will help go towards our 2022 bond payment. Again, with that information I provided, they will look at our updated property values, they will back into that rate to generate the amount we need to make our payments, and we will have that to share by the December board meeting. So just kind of wanted to let you know where we're at with that process, and I will have more information next month.
If I could jump in real
Sure,
quick.
go ahead,
You know, a little history lesson, and you all, we may be fully aware of this, but, you know, when we were structuring that, what we discovered we couldn't do as a board is lock in what future boards would do. So the real truth of the matter is, this board right now, instead of going on the ballot for operating money at some point, could back that off and have operating money, and people's taxes would go up. Because you could go up to what that bond is. And so we said, hey, if a board ever made that decision, let's do that in the most public and transparent sort of way you can, and that's why you review this. And you know, at this juncture, it seems like that would never make sense to do, but there could be a point, you know, if you're facing layoffs or cutbacks, that a board could employ that. I mean, and the board always would have the authority to do that. Am I correct?
Yeah,
And I just gotta be
that's
upfront that you do. And so we wanted to lock it in where future boards couldn't, and we couldn't legally do that. But so if you can't, then boards need to understand the responsibility and authority they would have with that, if that makes sense. And we were upfront with the taxpayers at the time, but that's always an option the board would have.
So the slide that I have shared on the screen right now just shows a little bit of the history about the bond millage rates. The bar graphs in yellow show the old 1994 bond levy. That levy was kind of, you know, just coming to an end. We were, you know, coming to the final bond payments on that, to having that completely paid off at the same time that we were planning for that new issue. So you can see in 2019 was the final year of the old bond levy, and the first year of partial collections on the new levy. 2020, we went through that millage setting process that I just explained here, and our millage rate was 4.45. 2021, we went through that process again, and that millage dropped to 4 mills. And that drop, the plan for our millage model throughout the life of that bond levy was flat millage. The reason we see a drop for 2021 was because we had a larger than expected increase in property valuation from our triennial update. So accordingly, or you know, based on that fact, the millage rate dropped a little bit. What I expect for 2022 is that millage rate to stay flat at 4 mills. We're not in a revaluation year, we're not in a triennial update year, so there should not be much of a change in property valuation. And again, as I mentioned, the plan for that bond millage throughout the life of it is flat. And that's kind of unique to our millage model with our Grandview Yard money.
And
So
what's
just
really remarkable, if you compare 2015 to now, you know, the millage rate for a bond is 1 1/4 higher. And you're sitting in this facility, and we're renovating that facility, and we're doing the site work, and we're paying $1 1/4 higher than we were in 15. I mean, we passed the PI levy, it was 2. You know, so I mean, I was still, you know, I'll go to my grave believing that this project will save this community money. I really think it will.
And then the last thing I wanted to share, just a couple quick highlights from our 2021 financial prospectus. There are copies on the table in the back, but I have also included a copy for each of you on the table here. The 2021 is our 5th annual publication. It's kind of hard to believe that it's been 5 years already. But just a couple of things that to highlight. This was mailed to all of our community members a couple weeks ago. We talk a little bit about where our funding comes from, you know, what our spending priorities are. We included some information about the Grandview Yard, and this chart really mirrors what I just shared with you a couple moments ago. The one piece that I did include in the financial prospectus was a comparison to the voted millage. So again, that's that same information. Once again, we're near the bottom of the list in terms of school tax per 100,000 in Franklin County. We've been third from the bottom, I think, for several years now. There's quite a bit of information on our construction project and our facility timeline. You can, kind of see the progress that we've made on the timeline. And then one of the things that I was most excited about to share in that financial prospectus this year was some real examples of how these new facilities are impacting learning. And so we had a couple of our high school teachers share some quotes and some pictures just showing what a significant difference it is. For example, the high school science labs, what they're able to do in terms of science experiments in conjunction with their classroom learning is pretty remarkable. And so we have a couple examples, and I thought that was something that was really exciting, as we have completed the first phase of this project. And then equally as exciting is the partnership. We thought it was really important to highlight that partnership with the city, the work that the school district and the city have done together to enhance that site plan. So that was another real highlight of this year's financial prospectus. So it's on the website if anybody wants to take a look at it. There's copies back there. There's copies at the public library, copies in the school buildings. So feel free to take a look, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Any questions for Beth on the treasurer's report? Once again, thank you, Beth. You've always done a great job with the presentations, and they always just get better and better. I appreciate the PowerPoint. I know those are a lot of time to go through, but it's good to visually to take a look at that. So with that being said, can I have a motion to accept the October 2021 financial reports and the payment of the October 2021 bills?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussions? Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
All right, let's roll. Recommendations from superintendent by the action of the board. First up, board policy and procedure. This is a final reading, so these are all on the last month's agenda. If I could have a motion for board policy A1A through H.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussions on those policies? Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
Business and finance, 1 through 12. Let's, if it's okay with you, can I pull out number 2? Could we have a motion for business and finance B to the Grandview Heights Public Library resolution?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? I was like-
Yeah.
I'm sorry, could I have a motion for B2
Okay.
under business and finance,
Okay, so
the
we're doing that
resolution?
first.
So moved.
Second.
And Ryan, I didn't know if you want to say anything about that, or if the board had any questions for Ryan while he was here.
I don't have any statement necessary, but happy to answer any questions. This is in regards to the library's current operating levy that expires this year, and we're looking to renew this in the May election next year. So the process, it goes through our taxing authority, which is you, before it goes to the Board of Elections.
And I think this board's familiar with the library sort of passing through. I know we have new board members.
Yeah, and I do want to highlight that it's a straight renewal. This is not a replacement levy, so it's the same tax rate as the current levy.
Do appreciate coming today.
Oh,
for a
absolutely.
big vote. Did want to just ask, maybe I just read it wrong or read it too fast, but was it a 5-year renewal and now it's a 6-year?
That's correct. The previous term was for 5 years, and after our finance committee looked at our current forecast, we decided to do it for 6 years.
So that would be basically locking in that rate for 6 years.
That's correct. So since it's a renewal levy, like your operating levies, we'll get the same dollar amount for that continued period of time.
Are you allowed to do a permanent?
We are. And
You
we
should
do
just
have
say
one
that,
of our
man.
permanent, Pardon me?
If you did that, you wouldn't have to come back to us every 5 years.
Of course, you do get the same amount of money for that entire length, and at some point you would have to replace it.
Yeah.
We're doing a renewal to lock in the rollbacks and the homestead exemptions, which are a big part of that.
I understand. Any questions or discussions? Well, thank you. I know we've talked a lot about the city, but we appreciate the partnership with the library and all of you have done. And so, you know, as we sort of break pandemic rules, I'm sure we'll see more and more. So if there's no other questions, Beth, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Thanks for allowing me to pull that out separate. If we could have another motion for business and finance, that now will be 1, 3 through 12.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, I know that I think a lot of the change orders and things we discussed, I don't know if we need to go into any of that anymore, if there's any questions from the board. What-
It is more than just, I mean, the roofing was a big one in here, but there is more than that in here.
Correct.
And I feel like I've talked about a lot of finance, so I don't have a question, but I just wanted to point out that it is more than the roofing increase.
Yes. Any questions or discussion? Beth?
Okay, Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
Personnel, C1 through 13.
Mr. Truitt, can I just give you a brief update? There are 2 minor corrections that need to be reflected in the personnel items.
Please.
That kind of came at the kind of at the end of the day, and Haley's out of the office to update the agenda. So item number 8, LMS building stipends. So that amount should, instead of $1,000, it should be $600. So the $1,000 was the final stipend for grades 6 through 8, or for grades 4, 5, but this is a 6 through 8 position. And so those stipends had been used up for grades 6 through 8. So we're just making sure that we're following the letter of the contract. There was the $600 stipend remaining for that grade band. So that one should be $600. And then under 10B, the marching band assistant director, everything is correct except the dollar amount. On our salary schedules, there are 3 different columns based on how many years of experience you have. The amount reflected on there is the highest, and that person should be at the lowest level. So that dollar amount should be $3,065.37. And then everything else is correct.
I have 2 comments as well. First and foremost, personnel 1 and 2. Just want to say that, you know, we have, I think, hired in or around 8 custodians in the last 3 months. So we've had significant transition, and just want to thank Christina Brannon and Jim and principals for their work with getting that accomplished. You know, that's a lot of transition and needed oversight, accountability, and I just appreciate that. And then I also wanted to mention number 5 gives teachers more money when they cover during their personal plan for shortages, which is deserved. So thank you for the board's support for that.
A quick question on that, Andy. Is that like when nothing else, like there's not a substitute?
Yeah.
Can be
So
found,
what
this
happens is
not the go-to solution?
It is definitely not the go-to solution. There's no doubt. Correct.
Okay.
There continues to be a shortage of substitutes all around.
Yeah.
All around
Yeah.
the state.
I mean, it's a small
All over.
token of appreciation and recognition of, you know, for example, Emily covering someone else's class during her personal plan because we don't have coverage. So,
Doesn't it also cover too when like students accept, like I think it'd perhaps be more like a Stevenson building where you have to send students from one class into another, they absorb the students.
yes.
It's K-12, it shakes out differently. But when you are in charge of students that are not normally on your roster,
Yeah.
it's not just timed, it's compensated for
Right,
time worked.
sure, because it's harder to teach a class of,
Well, it's also too in lieu of like planning time, prep time, that's negotiated in the contract.
Right.
You are giving up your
Yep.
contract work time to make sure that students are properly, safely educated, cared for,
Right.
everything.
Right.
And this is, I'm gonna use the word crisis in Franklin County is for substitutes. Am I not exaggerating to say that word crisis?
Yeah, it's gotten a little better, but it's a crisis.
Okay, we'll still need a motion on the table for C personnel, 1 through 13, with the changes in 8A and 10B that Beth noted.
So moved.
second,
Any other questions or discussions on personnel? All right. Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Westman?
Aye.
It's nice of Miss Meister to stay until her costume design advisor for the musical supplemental, because that comes out to a good 72 cents an hour when it's done. Co-curricular activities, couple field trips, a lot of field trips. If I could have a motion for D 1 through 5, please.
So moved.
Second.
Once again, this is hopefully these things would happen. We think we've talked about the field trips before, and then I did fail to mention those volunteers are in there. So any other questions or discussions? Yes. No, we did not.
Okay, I'm sorry, after that, can I make a comment?
Certainly. Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
Ms. Westman?
Aye.
I know Dot was not here when we did public participation at the beginning, so we'll go back. I don't have to say my speech, do I, for you, right?
No, we're all good. We're all good, but I'm Dot Kyle, 1419 Mulford Road, and it is my pleasure this year to serve as the president of the Band Parents Association. And last Friday, we took a major field trip where we took every band student in grades 5 through 12 to the Ohio State Youth Band Concert. Unfortunately, I think I was the only person on the band parent board who wasn't able to attend that trip. But what I hear from my sources is it was a tremendous success. So I wanted to take this opportunity to provide a little bit of recognition. Of course, it's everybody's job, but there are always people here on the staff who just go above and beyond, and I really wanted to recognize that. So when we're talking about the volunteers, I want to recognize Haley Head, who made sure that all 23 of our volunteers were cleared and ready to go, and that we had folks that were approved in order to make that happen. It was over 200 students who attended that field trip. It was really a major undertaking. I want to recognize Angie, who felt, as we did, that this was an important field trip, and she cleared her schedule so that she could cover Mr. Pettit's classes that day. That allowed all 4 of our music teachers to attend that field trip. We talk a lot about vertical alignment and professional development, and I think that was an excellent example of that for our fine faculty. I'd like to recognize our principals who were just so helpful. Not only did we send those students, but many of them came back either during their lunch or were ready to miss lunch. So you have to find alternate locations of where you're going to feed 200 students, and they really were able to make that happen. And finally, somebody had to make those lunches. So a big shout out to Kyle, who was, he's just always amazing to work with. That was a very seamless production and also involved him personally going to more than one Sam's Club to find peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I really appreciate the support from all of the faculty and staff in making that opportunity happen for our students. It was May 17th, I looked back, the May 17th Band Parents Association meeting that Mr. Herman said, here's something we could do. And after, close to 2 years of very limited fundraising, we weren't sure how we were going to do that. Of course, we started with the marching band, but then we had a very successful decal drive and sponsorship drive this fall, fundraising from the community. Community support for the band program is tremendous, and that is what allowed us to fully fund that trip for over 200 students. So thank you, and big recognition to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Dot, if we could, I'd also, on behalf of the board, and I'm sure everybody feels the same way, you're always so good at recognizing those around you. You always have been. But you deserve a big round of a lot of credit, round of applause. Yeah. The hours that you put in, and I can't imagine a better band booster president than you.
Well, thank you. I don't mind saying this one was a lot of work. And our meeting is next Thursday, and that's when we'll be discussing whether this is an annual thing that we do or what that might look like for the future. So for those of you who have students, and I know many of you had students who went on that trip, I'm interested in your feedback. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Items for discussion. We do have one item, and we talked earlier under the core team about looking at a date for, I forgot we had this on here, to schedule a potential work session for facilities. I honestly don't think, we're not talking about sort of, master planning or like things we talked about last time. It's really just sort of looking at our current project and making sure that the board, has a really good grasp of where we are. So I'd imagine 60 to 90 minutes maybe. Selfishly, I prefer.
Can we have Katie?
And Katie, I'd like.
Katie, do you want to get your calendar out as well?
Be part of this sort of deciding where.
Welcome to the team.
So let's start backwards. I believe our December board meeting's on the 8th. Is there an evening we could squeeze in between today and the 8th?
Sure.
Could do tomorrow.
We're not prepared for tomorrow.
Well, don't throw it out there.
About the week after Thanksgiving, is it?
Yeah. So let's just go through the first or second.
That's fine.
You prefer not Thursdays, right?
I prefer the first because we're kind of acclimated to Wednesdays, but
Does that work?
Could we do Tuesday?
Yeah, the first.
Okay, do you want to start a little earlier, 7, 6?
does it not work for you? You sounded unsure.
Yeah, I have a meeting at 7 on the first. First doesn't work for me.
Second?
Can we do this
Katie
now?
wants to do a second.
Did we skip over the 30th?
I'd rather not do a Thursday,
Could we do the 30th?
for the same reason that Eric would rather not do a Thursday.
What about?
Gentlemen. If Emily says the 30th, will someone listen?
I'm good with the 30th.
I've said it like 3 times.
I know.
Katie?
That's fine.
Yeah.
There's an orchestra concert on the 30th, I'm sorry.
Okay, Monday.
I think you need to throw out a date.
Monday.
Perfect. Monday the
29th.
29th, fine.
Mondays with us. Mondays with Matinee.
Does that work for you, Katie?
What time?
After 5:30.
You want to do 6? 7? 8? I don't care.
10.
It should be.
Have you met Jesse Truitt?
Time's fluid.
What time?
What about 6?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Kind of with,
I'm good with you.
What's
I
that?
guess.
Either one.
but you can't make 5, right?
No, I thought 5. I eat dinner at 4:30 because that's who I am. But
I would
thought-
prefer to be a little bit later because I need someone to be able to be home to watch my children. So like 6 or later would be good.
Why don't you do 7?
7's
then?
good? Okay,
Yeah.
just like a board meeting, okay. So Monday, the 29th at 7 o'clock?
I'll send an invite, everyone.
Okey dokey.
Yeah, okay. Just put that away.
All right. Anything for executive session? No, I will, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Got it. Beat you, Kevin.
Beth?
Who seconded that?
Bodie?
Okay, Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.